Okay, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. My name is Pete Deely. I'm glad you came back again. Week after week, I just get blessed by the divine and wonderful people come into my life, and I get a chance to talk to them. And this week is no exception. As you probably have heard at this point, if you've been listening, we don't really tell you why you should listen to these guests. Instead, we just say, listen, bring an open mind and see what interests you. If they intrigue you and you want to learn more about them, I promise you, we will tell you where to go to learn all about them. So this week, we have Tiffany Owen with us. Tiffany, it's so good for you to spend time with us. Thank you.
I am so excited to be here. I am just honored to bring value to your audience and pour into them today.
Well, thank you. I'm lucky. They're lucky. I feel blessed. Tell me, we like to start with this idea of the energy that you're bringing to your life. Like, what problem or problems in the world are you organizing your energy around solving? Because I know you're very passionate, and I think you're very passionate about not just one thing, but many things. But I think there are some core problems that you're working on in the world, and I would ask you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love that you asked this question. And I have to take a breath because you'll have to bear with me. I get really excited when I talk about this, and it
Okay.
can come
Okay.
across as like nervousness. So I like to defuse the situation.
Okay.
Because I knew you were going to ask this question, I would like to read what I wrote because
Okay.
I want to make sure it is articulated just right. So I am personally on a mission to empower people stuck in the vicious cycle of self-sabotage
Mm.
and a victim mindset to be radically transformed into the person that God created them to be. So, through my experience with PTSD, sexual and physical abuse, mental health struggles that started at the age of 12, 4 suicide attempts,
Oh my
me
goodness.
personally, abandonment trauma, addiction to prescription pills and alcohol, um, 3 failed marriages by the time I was 29, so much more. I am a mother of 4 and I'm almost 43, but my life has been very, very traumatic, and I have been able to turn my pain into my purpose.
Okay.
So I want to offer hope to the hopeless and those struggling in silence. So
Okay.
the victim mindset and the vicious cycle of self-sabotage, that's a big
Wow.
one.
That is a big one. Well,
It's a
you
big
have.
undertaking.
Yeah, thank you for being so prepared and eloquent in your description of your life's work and how amazing it is that you are taking on what is at the core of the human condition for people. I mean, you're not, regardless of your level of trauma in your life, chances are, not chances are, everybody is dealing with what they're dealing with. And
Yep.
there are differing degrees, and every time you think you're suffering the worst in the world, there's always a story that can break your heart even further. And there's so it's wrong to put things on a continuum. Like, this is more suffering than the others. At the same time, also being clear-minded about what what would it take to get over certain things. So given that you're wrestling with such a core fundamental part of being a human being, and that you have so much experience in your life, was there a moment that you're like, this is what I want to do? Like, and it became clear in an instant? Or as you went through these difficult times, was it a process that incrementally, piece by piece, you built, what you're working on today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm a Christian. And so God put it on my heart, gosh, probably when I was a child, to write a book.
Okay.
But he kept adding a chapter, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
every once in a time, like my husband and I, this would joke, okay, here's another chapter.
Yeah.
So I had good years and bad years, but ultimately I was stuck in a victim mindset, even though if you looked on the outside, I was very successful, very fit, for a beautiful I was getting things done, but dying inside. Okay.
Interesting.
So 2 years ago in June, this was my defining moment of when I finally had to do something. I tried to kill myself for the 4th time in my
Mm,
life. First
mm,
time I was 16. And It kind of came out of nowhere. I've struggled with mental health issues for my whole life, and my drinking had gotten out of control. I was going to bed asking God to please just let me go to sleep and not wake up. I was
Mm,
more afraid of living than dying.
mhm,
So that happened, and my husband had to make the very tough decision to give me an ultimatum. And he said, you lose your family or you go to treatment. And so, of course, I picked treatment.
mhm,
And I went in with, this is it. God's not going to let me die. So now I have a purpose and I have
mhm.
to do something about it, right? So I went in like, okay, this is it. This I'm going to write my book and I'm going to do something with this because it's life or death for me now. So I've always
Literally.
known, but it really took off about 2 years ago.
That's a lot, like, so that's you're 41 2 years ago.
Yeah,
40,
yeah,
39, 41. And then your
pretty much.
first time you attempted suicide, you're 16. So, I mean, this is a lifetime of conflict that, it sounds like there are times when you were winning the conflict and then times when you were losing the conflict and times when you might have been achieving but losing at the same time, and maybe times when you were losing then you were actually like gaining ground, if I had to guess, just because what's going on in terms of what people see and then what's actually going on don't always match up. um, the weight of all of those years of culminating in these extraordinary moments as a person of faith, like that boundary between respecting the gift of life and then deciding that you might go back on that promise that, like, hey, I, this is a blessing that I get to do this, is that must have created a repercussion of like, what, not only did I survive that moment, but then I have to reconcile with like, who am I that came to that moment, right? So this happens a few times in your life. What what would you say in this last experience um, converted you, to use a term familiar to the faith, to a life where you're now on a different road, right? Because it feels like, oh man, there's like up and down, and then something changed. Is what it sounds like. Am I
Yeah,
right or am I wrong?
absolutely. So the difference this time, okay, my husband now, we've been married 13 years. So I have a 22-year-old, a 17-year-old, and then we have twins together that are 12.
Wow.
And all it took was him drawing a hard line with me because that's not who he was. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we've always had a great marriage, but I was slowly destroying it without realizing it, right?
Okay.
That's all it took for me. I didn't want to lose my family.
Hmm.
So I'm very proactive. So it's like a switch flipped in me. And I'm like, okay, I have to give myself permission to think differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because alcohol and
Right.
the what I've been doing is no longer an option.
Okay.
I have to figure out new coping tools and truly heal if I want to live a life like I'm supposed to
Yeah.
with right. Um, and it was just time. And I
So
had an
the
amazing system too this time.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you just listening, if you're to see Tiffany, you're clearly a woman of discipline. You don't look the way that you look by being undisciplined. So, was the discipline that's evident in your kind of physical being present prior to this, or go? Tell me about that, because it would
Great.
seem you have a lot of willpower. Nobody looks the way you
Yes,
look without having a ton of willpower.
absolutely. I contend for the best version of me every single day. It is work, but
Right.
totally worth it. So I've been in fitness for 20 years.
Okay.
I was always a student that excelled. That is how I found my self-worth
Hmm.
doing. Right? So that I had going for me. So no one ever knew I had issues because I always made good grades. I was very successful. So working out and health have been a part of my life for over 20 years. So
Right.
that absolutely helped with this for
Okay.
sure, right? Because I already had that foundation.
Yes. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, you have those, muscles can be metaphorical, right? Like you had the muscles of, hey, if I set a goal to do X, Y, or Z, what does it mean to move in that direction? I'm curious as you take the trauma that you had and you were out helping people, do you find that people are suspicious of your suffering because when they look at you, they go, well, it couldn't have been you. Like you look,
Mhm.
you're so put together, you're so successful, you're so these other things. Do you find that like it's harder in some instances to say, listen to my story, take away your preconceptions about what you think you're looking at in terms of me, and then get them there? Like, or do people, are they just disarmed right from the, and they get it right away?
That's a great question too. So I live a very vulnerable life on social media.
Okay.
So for the past 4 years, I've been living my life out loud with my coaching and all of that. And I would also talk about the down moments too.
Hmm.
If you know me and you know my heart, I'm very authentic and I can get vulnerable with people very easily. So I always try to share the not so good side for that reason, because you could look at me and be like, oh, well, what does she have to complain about? She's
Right,
got
right.
it all. But I did go through a season where I've got some before pictures that show I did not have it all together. And I remind people of what I used to be.
When you're trying to help somebody and they come to you, like where do you like to start the conversation? I'm trying to think about like what you're delving into with the person is so fundamental to who somebody is as a human being. Because where do these patterns start? They're probably really subtle and probably go back, very deep into somebody's life. So how do you begin the process of telling somebody how you feel now is not how you're always going to feel, and we're going to
So
uncover, this new
yeah,
life?
most of the people who reach out to me have been watching me on social media for a year or more. So
Okay.
when they finally get the courage to reach out and we do a consultation or we connect to see if what I offer is a good fit, they already feel like they know me because
Yeah.
I have, and a lot of them have read my book. So then they really know me. And building trust and
Hmm.
making people feel seen and
Yeah.
heard, valued is my number one priority, and connection.
Right.
And reaching out to me most of the time for a workout, for fitness,
Right.
right?
Right.
Do not do fitness coaching without mindset coaching.
Okay.
Okay. I will not write you a workout if we are not going to do mindset, life coaching, whatever you
Right.
want to call it. Right?
Right.
Do not separate them, period. And so when I explain that to them and explain this experience, that's where we start. But the relationship started when they started watching me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, all of the things that it's such a double-edged sword. I mean, all the conversations about social media, yeah, cut one way, but they cut both ways. There's like there it is. Um, it's such a fascinating time to have children. It's such a fascinating time to be an adult watching this. It's a fascinating time to cultivate personal business relationships over the context of like this tool that only existed for a short period of time. These problems that you're describing are part of the human condition since we've been humans, and it's been, it's interesting this new technology there. Um, well, maybe you could talk a little bit about once somebody agrees, yes, it's not just about the body, it's about the larger idea. What are some typical um, status quo circumstances do you come up again? I mean, what I mean by that is like they may think that this is a law of nature, like I can't change this, and you're suggesting to them, no, in fact, you just perceive that it's a law of nature. It is changeable. Like, do you have any of those types of dynamics in the people that come to you?
I've coached 1,400 people in the past 4 years, but my fitness business took off like what I'm doing now, about a year ago. And I'm very blessed. They trust me right away. And
Okay.
I ask them, and here's the number one step. I ask them to give themselves permission to think differently.
Right.
So you can pick it back up. You
Right.
can
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
your old habits, behaviors, all the things. You can pick it back up whenever you want. But for just a little bit,
Right.
will you give yourself permission to think differently? And will you trust me? And I emphasize that I never ask them to do something that I would not do myself. And it is never just to keep them busy. It is because it will add value to
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
life and it will change their life. Does
Yeah.
that answer the question?
Well, I mean, what you're saying to me is that in this relationship, when they actually come to you, the relationship's been going on for a while. And so when you open the door to say, if you trust me, I will show you a different reality than the one you're currently living. And it's interesting to me that you can establish that in a one directional like type of communication because they're listening to you before they're getting a chance to get feedback, but they're and so you're moving them along. You describe in things that you have overcome to come to this a variety of things that are all very difficult. Each one, in and of itself, and we talk about addictions, and we talk about using, substances that are not good for us. Talk about being the recipient of physical violence in a variety of ways that you have. Um, is there? Uh, Are you surprised by the number of people that come to you with similar stories to you? Is the world full of, as you have done this work, so many people, do you feel more connected to humanity in that like, yes, I went through these things and you know what? I'm one of many, many
Yeah.
people that have been through similar things. I'm just curious if that's part of your point of view.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I deal with a lot of food addicts, right?
Yeah,
Sugar addiction. I heard you talking to someone about it on one of your podcasts.
yeah,
Addiction's addiction, right?
sure.
Trauma's trauma, right? So we all have a common, you know. So um, nothing surprises me. There's so much healing and just being able to share your truth with someone and not be judged.
Yeah, right.
And that's where a lot of the healing starts.
Yeah,
And they think they're just signing up for a workout.
right, 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 right. Yeah, yeah,
The workouts work. The workouts
yeah.
work. We transform your mind, your body will follow. And I have a lot of client testimonials that I constantly share too. So they don't only see me,
Hmm.
they see clients anywhere from 30 to 60s, all fitness levels. So I'm very um, aggressive, for lack of a better word, with sharing other people's transformations.
Yeah. Well, I think feeling not alone, not isolated, not like I'm the only one with X is something that makes it inherently lighter because it then that point of connection just gives you strength because now instead of out there on the island of like nobody could possibly understand it to me. And in my mind, given the things that you've been through, there are certain types of things that I think if you do not hold in common with that other person, it would be very difficult to trust that they in fact understand it.
Absolutely.
And the violence that women have experienced, in at the hands of men is a type of thing that I don't think the healing happens in the same way if someone hasn't walked in those shoes. And I think of that as such a hard type of trauma to overcome and the type of trauma that you could go, I'd never want to think about that again. I don't want to, to stay connected to it as a tool to heal other people is a mark of strength and, of service that the world benefits greatly from. But sure, it's not easy.
Can I
Do you,
tell you how I do it? Can I
yeah,
tell you
I was
how?
going to ask you that. I was exactly going to ask you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so my true healing with because with all this coaching I do and these sessions, I could be triggered all the time, right?
Sure.
And then we feel it in our body, we relive it, and it's very taxing. So the way I had true healing, and how I know I am free from the people who abuse me because of multiple, right? So it started with forgiveness, but not just forgiveness, it's seeing them through compassionate eyes,
Yeah.
right? So if I can see the person who hurt me with compassion and as a hurt person, then I get my power back.
Yeah. Yes.
And I talk about it in my book that's
Okay.
how, I mean, I had been divorced 3 times by the time I was 29. I kept marrying abusive men, right? I mean,
Right.
that's crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. So, and I have kids with a couple of them. And so when I would see them, hear them, it was like trigger, you know. Um, I knew I was healed when I was able to be around someone that had hurt me and I did not feel it in my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just looked at them with compassion. It doesn't mean they're off the hook.
Right.
And I also, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I acknowledge my part in every situation. And I explain more in my book about that because, like I said, it can be controversial. But we all have a part in everything we do,
Hmm.
right? There's a payoff in most things that we do. And I learned that in therapy a long time ago. And it really made me angry when the counselor told me that. Like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
you had a part. Well, I did not want to receive that. But then when I really thought about it and I was able to say, okay, well, I had this going on. I was blacked out drunk, got taken advantage of, right? I shouldn't have been drinking. So that's just an example.
Right.
So when I was able to own my part, then I got my power back.
Right. Right. Yeah. When you say that, the expression that comes to mind is just sort of like, the truth shall set you free. I mean, that it the coping. I think when we talk about coping, we talk about like how do you work your way through ideas and so on and so forth. If there's not a truth to if there's not truth in the circumstance will go wrong in my mind. Like for me, if I'm not telling the truth about it, that's one of the reasons why I love being a jujitsu athlete. Because in jujitsu, you can't fake it. If I don't have the position and the person that I am grappling with does, it will become abundantly clear because I will get hurt. Like
Yeah.
if I don't say, okay, the truth of the situation is that I can't get out of this and I need to tap. And it is a metaphor that is so useful because in other circumstances, it's like, well, as you talk about, okay, if I'm drunk, if I'm out of, my physical control, and then there's a consequence to that. If there's no sense of like one leading one having some contributing factor to the other, then there's no motivation to take a look at what are the
Mhm.
potential consequences of the first thing. Um, which so for me, it's not controversial to say, you know, you got to have an honest appraisal of the whole picture. And not that it excuses anybody, as you said, nobody's off the hook for the terrible things that they may have done, but there are definitely things to learn um, as we examine all of our life. So uh, in that, like, what must have been painful processes to come to kind of find out where were your payoffs in these things that you were in fact the victim of these terrible things. How does that translate into your teaching? Like, how do you that's such a sensitive thing to get into with someone else. So someone wants to talk about physical violence and you want to talk about, well, let's be thorough here and also take a look at where your what your payoff was in the circumstance. That seems
Yeah.
so hard. Can you tell me a little bit about like how that works?
Definitely. It's definitely a slow process that I tread lightly and look for open doors. But if we have someone who is complaining about being stuck, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm not getting the results. I just, you know, I keep falling off. I keep self-sabotaging, right? So it's asking the right questions
Okay.
first. First, I meet them with compassion and
Hmm.
empathy, right? So that softens a little bit. And then I try to ask really good questions of, well, what part did you have in it? Like, what could you have done differently?
Yeah.
What did you learn? What did this make possible? So without any accusatory, what did you do? What was your part?
Right, right.
Asking good questions and letting them figure out the answer. I don't have to tell them anything.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that sounds very wise to me because if you were telling them something then they're just like they just survive the moment, even if they go, "Oh, you're right, you're right." There's no change happening in that. Because you're really just trying to get them to answer the question for themselves, right? Like you're
My
not,
job is
yeah,
to guide them. My job
yeah,
is to guide them to revelation, which leads to change and healing, right? And new behavior to create new habits.
right. Who sees it first? Do you see it first, or do the people work with see it first that things are starting to be different? Like, there's that term like habit stacking and all that atomic habit stuff where, hey, this is gonna be the aggregation of little gains. We're just gonna do little bit, and then you're gonna be surprised at what happens. So, do you notice it first, or do the people you work with notice it first?
I have a system for
Oh,
that.
tell me about
I,
that. Oh,
yep. Okay. So I have created in my fitness business, we have a community too. There's
okay,
accountability, there's authentic community connection. It's a holistic approach, right?
okay,
So when I start them out with their first session, um, an exercise we do, which is something your people can implement too. I have them share every night 3 wins for the day
hmm,
and then 3 wins that they plan on getting tomorrow.
nice,
Okay. This is an ongoing thing. I share with them, they share with me. It's in my book too.
okay,
So what we focus on grows, right? What we
right,
think about, bring about, right? So if we're looking for wins, we will find them. So if I start them in their journey looking for wins and
yes,
expecting them,
nice,
they will find them. And
yeah.
then when we do a check-in session, we always measure progress backwards. So it's a constant, because it's very small, subtle changes. So if they are not constantly being reminded or
Yeah.
acknowledging them, they'll fall off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, that to me sounds like a real opportunity for connection, real opportunity for optimism. In If you're in a vicious cycle, then having something that looks different than it did yesterday, how's it look different today, and how's it going to be different tomorrow? That sort of incremental progress it's hard to feel without being in relationship, whereas you're offering them like we will together, like this
Accountability.
is, yeah, that's so beautiful. Well, maybe
Yeah.
you could kind of like, you're wrapping these people in a lot of love, like maybe you can give us the full picture of what does it mean for someone to work with you, what is all of it?
So as I've been blessed to grow, I actually have a team that helps me now.
Okay,
So
okay,
there is a lot of one-on-one with me, and I write all of the workouts, but the community keeps each other accountable. So we have
okay,
a system set up in place with these small accountability groups where people connect, where it's not just me and them, right? Because I can only take on so much, right?
right,
And I want to have a lot of people.
right,
So we take like a holistic approach with fitness, mindset tools, and authentic community. So we have community Zooms. We have where we pair different people in the group, and they're from all over, where they share their wins with each other. I run challenges to incentivize these
okay,
things. It's really it's like no other model I have ever seen. So if somebody else is doing this, I don't know about it. And I've been in
okay,
fitness for years.
yeah,
But now I have a group, an amazing team of mindset mentors.
okay,
So where they get a session with me, and then they would do like a small group session
uh,
for a
uh,
check-in
okay,
in addition to their workout. And
right,
pretty much this is a cool thing too. Most of my clients are working out from home with minimal equipment and getting mind-blowing results. But I
right,
swear, because the mindset part is solid with what we do. And of course, there's nutrition guidance as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
But yeah, they're most of them are working out from home. It's incredible.
What is the entryway into like learning about you? Where do you like to
Yeah.
to guide people to go?
So I have a website. It is coachtiffanyowen.com.
Okay.
TiffanyOwen, no S, Tiffany Owen, coachtiffanyowen.com.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook, but if you go to my website, you can get my book from my website. All of my social media handles are on my website, testimonials, different packages I offer with coaching and what it looks like. So that would be the best place to go to.
Okay. Let's say somebody's like listening and they're like, man, that's awesome. But they just don't
Mhm.
know if they're ready. They don't know, like they may go to your website, they may not be ready to make any commitment. What's a small thing you could offer them to say, hey, consider this
Mhm.
like as
Yeah.
just something you could do to move in this direction? What's a small thing you could suggest?
So definitely follow me on social media
Okay.
because I live my life out loud and
Yeah.
it is a platform for inspiration and hope. Um, so it's used in a good way, but absolutely buy my book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because a lot of my coaching and the tools that I use with my clients, they're in the book.
Okay.
Not only is my story in the book, the
Right.
solution is in the book too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, um, as I think I could talk to you for a very long time. So as I kind of move towards the conclusion, you've done so much, and you've overcome all these different things. And in the context of overcoming things, you've built like this is out of
Mhm.
your imagination. This you're the founder of this. It's writ from who you are, your life. When you family aside, because everybody would pick family, what type of achievement in this part of your life would you like people to associate with you? Because I mean, there's a lot that in our conversation where I go, well, overcoming this or doing this or building this or helping this many people. Like, what would you pick to have someone go, oh, I remember Tiffany, and this is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I thought about this. I knew you were going to ask this. And I didn't get to share some other pretty crazy things that have happened. Like I was a living donor. I donated 65% of my liver to a stranger with cancer 5 years ago
Oh
in
my
the midst
goodness.
of, so I could say, oh, well, I want to be known as a living donor. I've done mission trips all over the world, all the things. But I want people to look at me and say, if she did it, I can do it too.
Okay.
That's it. Like I want them to see someone that was a suicidal addict that overcame and radically transformed her life and see that they can do it too.
Yeah. Yeah, how wonderful. We had tragedy in my family in the last 18 months or so where we lost an 18-year-old very healthy boy to suicide, and it was devastating to me in a way that I could not express to you how painful it was. And it was shattering in a inconceivable way to describe. So to talk to you and to know that you didn't give in because you're a super capable person. So there was some part of you that didn't want to do it because if you wanted to put a seal to that idea, you would have. And so there's some part of you that was like willing to roll the dice of coming out the other side because there are different ways in which person can create
Yeah.
that dynamic, right?
Well, real quick, I'm so sorry for your loss. It is
Yeah.
horrible. But in my book, because I share a perspective in hopes that people on the other side, like you, like my husband,
Hmm.
can heal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because that's not talked about enough, the people that are left behind,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And so in my book, I really try to offer a perspective for the loved one to maybe understand a little bit better inside the mind of someone who
Yeah. Yeah.
thinks that they need to not live anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. And I will tell you that, we are a family of, uh, it was, it was not something without signs. it wasn't out of the blue. But that boundary between doing that and not doing that there's a very stark experience to go from attempt to having accomplished that, and what that means to us. So I
Mhm.
appreciate that you've put energy into addressing those people that have been through that circumstance, and then have to figure out how to incorporate it into their own way of thinking about the world.
Yeah,
Because I think you can sometimes create patterns that don't exist because you are worried that things will repeat themselves. And so now
yeah,
you get like sometimes an irrational set of concerns because you're so afraid that that could happen again. So
yeah, and that's no for yeah,
right.
you
Yeah, it's for everybody. I mean, everybody involved. And so when early on, you talked about you freed yourself, you know, victim of, regardless of the part you played, somebody hurt you. The ability to see something with compassion, to divorce yourself from the need to like fix it in your mind as like this is the only way to see it, to have that kind of softness to it, where like, oh, I had to pay up. This was complicated. This wasn't simple. Um, I think is remarkable. I remember listening to something early in my life about what do you do with the past, and it was about like, well, it is kindling, for the brightness that you need to burn for the future in some senses of it. So I don't know that the past needs to be put away. It's always with us, but it can be
we can use it.
transformed, right? I mean, you've transformed a past that didn't always go the way it should have gone.
I got to create the narrative. I got to say, okay,
Yes,
what I was doing wasn't working. So it's there, it's done. How can I use it to move forward and serve me and
yes,
others?
yes,
We get to create the narrative.
yeah,
There's so much power in that, right? Um, we get to decide how we use it, and it can be used for a lot of positive. Because
clearly.
why, right?
That's right.
I mean, what's the alternative? A really crappy life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Tiffany, listen, I'm so grateful you spent time with us. Maybe you'll come back another time. There's, I think, a million stories in your life that, I didn't touch on.
I
And
would
so
love that.
we can do another conversation if you like. And just one last time before we say goodbye, just kind of remind people to Tiffany Owen, Coach TiffanyOwen.com, right?
Coach,
No S.
Coach Tiffany Owen, no S.com. And then I'm just Tiffany Owen on Facebook. But definitely the website. You can get my book, Wounded to Warrior,
Excellent. Good. Okay.
on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Walmart website.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, Tiffany, for having worked your way through all of those amazing things that you've now transformed into tools to help people live better lives. So thank you very much for all the good work you're doing in the world.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure to be here.